black waitress struggled to regain custody of her son. But when a millionaire farmer entered her life, everything changed. Evelyn wiped table 17 for the third time. The wall clock showed 10:45 p.m. Her fingers ached. Her feet throbbed inside her worn sneakers. The restaurant was empty except for her and the night cook. "You can go home, Evelyn," Roberto shouted from the kitchen. "It's cleaner than a hospital." She didn't respond. She took the crumpled letter from her apron pocket and read it for the 10th time. Hearing scheduled for July 15th. 21 days. Her hands trembled. Her phone vibrated. A photo of David appeared on the screen. He was smiling, showing his missing front teeth. Jason had sent the photo with the message, "He doesn't even ask about you anymore." Evelyn put away her phone. Her short nails scratched the plastic table. The ceiling fan spun lazily, spreading the smell of old coffee and grease. "Need a ride?" Roberto appeared at the kitchen door, removing his apron. "No thanks. I still have to finish up here." "It's almost 11, girl. Just a little longer." Roberto sighed and left through the back. The front doorbell rang. Evelyn turned, clutching the cloth in her hand. A tall man entered, shaking dust from his boots on the doormat. He wore jeans, a plaid shirt, and a worn cowboy hat. He looked around the empty restaurant. "Sorry," said Evelyn. "We're closing." "Just coffee?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. "I've been driving for 5 hours straight. Need to stay awake for one more." Evelyn hesitated. The man sat at the counter, removing his hat. He had wrinkles around his eyes and gray hair at his temples. "Please," he insisted. "I promise not to take long." She went to the coffee maker. Her hands were still shaking when she poured coffee into a clean cup. The man watched her movements in silence. "Thank you," he said when she placed the cup in front of him. His eyes noticed her name tag. "Evelyn?" She nodded and went back to cleaning tables. The back doorbell rang again. Roberto had left. The man drank his coffee slowly, looking out the window. The night was clear outside, with a full moon illuminating the empty parking lot. "How much do I owe?" he asked after 10 minutes. $3.50. He left a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." "You don't have to," she said. "Everyone needs it," he replied, putting on his hat. "Oh, good night, Evelyn." She waited for him to leave before taking the money. Her hands were still shaking when she put the bill in her pocket along with the court letter. At home, sitting on the bed in her small apartment, Evelyn opened the shoebox she kept under the bed. Photos of David filled every inch. Him at 2 covered in mashed potatoes, at 4 sleeping with his teddy bear, at 5 on his first day of school. Evelyn touched each photo. Her fingers still smelled of disinfectant. Her back ached. Her heart weighed a ton. "I'll bring you back," she whispered to the photos. "I swear I will." She put away the box and lay down without removing her uniform. The ceiling fan spun lazily, like at the restaurant. Tomorrow would be another work day, another day without David, another day closer to the hearing. She closed her eyes but couldn't sleep. The sun hadn't even risen when Evelyn arrived at her piece of land. The dew wet her sneakers as she walked between the rows of tomatoes. The dark sky was beginning to show purple patches on the horizon. She picked up the hoe leaning against the fence. Her hands already had calluses in the right places. The smell of wet earth filled her lungs as she began to work. "It's going to rain today," she muttered, looking at the dark clouds approaching from the east. The wind was stronger than usual. Her back ached from working at the restaurant, but she continued digging. Each strike of the hoe sank into the earth with a dull sound. Sweat trickled down her neck despite the cold morning air. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Evelyn looked at the sky again. The clouds were closer now, heavy and dark. "No, not today," she pleaded. "Please, not today." Another thunder, closer. The wind increased, shaking the plants. Dry leaves danced in the air. Evelyn dropped the hoe and ran to get the tarp stored in the small shed. The first drop fell when she was stretching the tarp over the tomatoes. The wind fought against her, pulling the plastic from her hands. Her fingers burned with the effort. "Need help?" Evelyn turned around. The man from the restaurant was standing by the fence, still wearing his cowboy hat. His boots were covered in mud. "What are you doing here?" she asked, holding the tarp tightly. Saw you working when I passed by on the road, he answered, jumping over the fence. Looks like it's going to be a strong storm. Another thunder exploded above them. The rain began to fall harder. Grab that end, Evelyn shouted over the noise of the wind. The man obeyed. Together they stretched the tarp over the plants. The rain soaked them, making the work more difficult. Got more tarps? He asked, water running down his face. In the shed. They worked in silence, rushing to cover as much of the plantation as possible. The storm roared around them. Lightning cut across the sky. Think that's it, he said after 20 minutes, breathing heavily. Evelyn nodded. Her arms were shaking from exhaustion. Wet clothes stuck to her skin. Come, she pointed to the shed. Have to wait it out. The shed smelled of wet earth and old tools. Evelyn sat on a makeshift bench made of planks. The man remained standing, taking off his wet hat. William, he said. My name is William. Do you always help strangers during storms, William? He smiled. Only when they serve me coffee after hours. Lightning illuminated the shed through the cracks. Evelyn saw some drops falling through the roof. It was my grandmother's, she said, looking at the wooden walls. This land. She used to grow everything here. You've kept it well maintained. I try, she wrung out the hem of her wet shirt. But sometimes it feels like it's not enough. William leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. It's never easy taking care of land alone. I don't have a choice. The storm continued outside. The sound of rain on the zinc roof was deafening. This storm will pass, William said. They all do. Evelyn looked at him. His clothes were also soaked, but he didn't seem to mind. Why are you really here? She asked. Because sometimes people need help, he answered simply, even if they don't ask. Evelyn's phone vibrated in her pocket. She took it out carefully, protecting it from the water. It was another message from Jason. Her hand started trembling again. William noticed but said nothing. The rain gradually decreased. The sun was trying to appear between the clouds when they left the shed. Thank you, Evelyn said, standing by the fence, for the help. William put on his wet hat. I'll be at the restaurant later. Need another coffee? He left before she could respond. Evelyn watched him walk away, feeling the water run down her back. The smell of wet earth was stronger now. She went back to examine the damage. Some plants had been uprooted by the wind, but most were protected by the tarps. Her hands were still shaking when she started working again. The sun finally appeared, strong and hot, drying her clothes as she continued struggling with the earth. The afternoon shift at Parada 301 was busier than usual. Evelyn served coffee and hamburgers non-stop, her arms still sore from working in the garden. The morning rain had brought in more truck drivers than normal, seeking shelter and hot food. Table 5 asking for the check, Roberto shouted from the kitchen. She grabbed the bill and crossed the dining room. The doorbell rang. Her steps froze midway. Jason walked in wearing his expensive suit and shiny shoes. His smile was cold as ice. Long time no see, Evelyn, he said, sitting at the counter. Still serving coffee to others, Evelyn delivered the check to table 5 with trembling hands. She returned behind the counter, keeping her distance. What do you want? To see how you're doing. He looked around the restaurant with contempt. David asked about you yesterday. Her heart raced. Is he okay? Better than ever. My new wife is great with him. Jason leaned over the counter. He barely remembers how it was before. Stop it. Stop what? I'm just being honest. His smile widened. What do you really think you have a chance at the hearing? The doorbell rang again. William walked in, stopping when he saw the scene. Evelyn noticed he was wearing different clothes than in the morning. Coffee, please, William ordered, sitting 2 chairs away from Jason. We're not done with our conversation, Jason said, his voice lower. Yes, we are. Evelyn served William coffee with shaking hands. Jason grabbed her wrist. Don't interrupt me. Let her go. William's voice was calm but firm. This is none of your business, cowboy. Let go of her wrist. Now. Jason released slowly. Just came to give a friendly message. He stood up, adjusting his tie. Give up the hearing, Evelyn. You can't win. You have no money. No lawyer, nothing. I have my son. No, he smiled. Not anymore. Jason left. The bell rang one last time. Evelyn ran to the kitchen, her legs weak. Hey! Roberto caught her before she fell. Breathe slowly. Tears ran down her face. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. He's going to take my son, she sobbed. He's right. I can't fight. Yes, you can. William was standing in the kitchen doorway. His face was serious. I have a lawyer, he said, one of the best in the state. Evelyn wiped her tears with her uniform sleeve. I can't afford it. You don't need to. William approached. He owes me some favors. Why? She asked. Why are you helping me? Because no one deserves to go through this alone. He took a card from his pocket. Call him tomorrow. Tell him I sent you. Roberto cleared his throat. Orders piling up, Evelyn. She put the card in her pocket. Her hands were still shaking, but less. Thank you, she said to William. I'll be here if you need me. He placed money on the counter. And Evelyn, he's wrong. You have more strength than you think. William left. Evelyn went back to work, serving coffee and hamburgers. The card weighed in her pocket like lead. At the end of her shift, sitting alone in the empty restaurant, she picked up the phone. Her hands hesitated over the numbers. You can do this, she whispered to herself. For David. She dialed the lawyer's number. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. Dr. Mendez's office, a female voice answered. Evelyn gripped the phone. Hi, William gave me this number. William Martinez? Yes. She took a deep breath. He said the doctor could help me. There was a pause. The doctor can see you tomorrow at 9. Would that work? The restaurant opened at 10. There would be enough time. Yes, that works, Evelyn replied. Thank you. The next morning, she was sitting in a room with air conditioning that was too strong. Dr. Mendez was a short man with round glasses and gray hair. William told me about your situation, he said, leafing through documents. We need evidence against your ex-husband. I have some photos. Evelyn took her phone from her purse. From when he... The office door opened. Excuse me, doctor, the secretary said. Someone wants to see Mrs. Evelyn. David ran in. Mommy! Evelyn jumped up, hugging her son. The smell of children's shampoo filled her lungs. I missed you, David said against her neck. I missed you too, my love. Tears were running down her face. Look, the teacher let me bring my drawing for you. He showed her a crumpled paper. It was a drawing of him with Evelyn holding hands. There was a smiling sun in the corner. It's beautiful, son. David! Jason's voice thundered from the reception. Come here now. The boy flinched. I need to go. Just a little longer, David. Everything will be okay, Evelyn whispered, kissing her son's forehead. I promise. David ran out. Jason appeared at the door, furious. This is invasion of privacy, he growled. I'll sue this office. You're on private property, Dr. Mendez said calmly. I suggest you leave. This isn't over, Jason pointed at Evelyn. You won't win. That's enough. William's voice sounded behind him. Leave, now. Jason turned, his face turned red when he saw William. You don't tell me what to do, hillbilly. No, William agreed, but the building security does. Want me to call them? Jason adjusted his tie. Come on, David. The boy looked at his mother one last time before following his father. Evelyn sat heavily in the chair. Perfect timing, Dr. Mendez said to William. As always, I came to see if everything was okay. William sat next to Evelyn, and apparently it wasn't. Did he follow you? The lawyer asked Evelyn. Probably. She held David's drawing against her chest. He has people watching me. That's good. Dr. Mendez smiled. More evidence for us to use. Can you really help me? William rarely asks for favors. The lawyer took off his glasses. When he does, it's important. We're going to win this custody case, Mrs. Evelyn. She looked at William, who was observing David's drawing. Your son has talent, he said. He takes after his mother. Evelyn carefully folded the paper. I used to like drawing too. Do you still like it? I don't have time anymore. William was silent for a moment. "Come with me. I want to show you something." "I have to work." "I called Roberto. He gave you the morning off, Dr. Mendez smiled. "Go, Mrs. Evelyn. I have work to do here." She followed William to his car, a dusty blue pickup truck. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." The truck stopped in front of a huge farm. Green fields stretched to the horizon. "Welcome to Hope Farm," William said. "My home." Evelyn looked at him, surprised. "You live here?" "Along with 20 other employees," he smiled. "Want to see it?" She hesitated for a moment. David's drawing was still in her purse. "Yes." The tall grass brushed against Evelyn's legs as she followed William through the field. The morning sun warmed her back. 2 horses grazed peacefully in the distance. "How many hectares?" she asked. 200. William stopped at the first corral fence. "Started with 10. A group of workers waved from afar. William returned the greeting. "Why did you bring me here?" "I have a proposal." He turned to her. "I saw how you care for that land, how hard you work, and how about expanding?" William pointed to a barn next to the main house. "That space is empty. It would be perfect for a pie shop." Evelyn froze. "How do you know about the pies?" "Roberto," William smiled. "He said your pies are the best he's ever had." "I can't accept." "Why not?" "Because," she ran her hand through her hair, "because that's not how things work." Her phone vibrated. A message from Dr. Mendez. "Preliminary hearing scheduled for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Her legs weakened. William held her arm. "Everything okay?" "Hearing." Her voice came out shaky. "Tomorrow." William guided her to a nearby bench. "Take a deep breath." "I don't have money for rent this month," she said suddenly. "How am I going to pay for a lawyer?" "I already told you, you don't need to pay. Everyone wants something in return." William sat beside her. "Not everyone." The wind blew between them, bringing the smell of grass and wet earth. A dog barked in the distance. "When I was your age," William began, "I lost everything. My wife, my daughter." Evelyn looked at him. His face was serious, looking toward the horizon. "Car accident," he continued. "I was working. Always working. I'm sorry. After that I built all this." He gestured to the farm. "But you know what I discovered? Success means nothing when you're alone." A chicken ran past them, followed by 3 chicks. "I don't want your pity," Evelyn said. "It's not pity," William stood up. "It's partnership. You have talent, you have strength. You just need a chance. What if I lose? What if Jason wins? Then we fight again." He extended his hand. "Come, I want to show you the barn." Evelyn took his hand. His calluses met hers. The barn was bigger inside. Large windows let in natural light. The smell of new wood filled the air. "Needs renovation," William said. "But it has potential." Evelyn walked through the empty space. Her steps echoed on the concrete floor. "Could put the counter there," she murmured. "Tables near the windows. See? You're already planning." She turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I believe in you." William leaned against the door. "And because David deserves to see his mother achieving her dreams." Her son's name made her heart tighten. Tomorrow. The hearing was tomorrow. "I need to go," she said. "I have to prepare. Think about the proposal." William took the truck keys. "No pressure." On the way back, Evelyn stayed silent. David's drawing weighed in her purse. The empty barn danced in her mind. "Want me to pick you up tomorrow?" William asked when he stopped in front of the restaurant. "No," she opened the door. "I need to do this alone." "You're not alone, Evelyn." She looked at him one last time before entering the restaurant. Roberto was waiting at the counter. "How was it?" "I don't know." She took her apron. "I really don't know." The courthouse was a gray and imposing building. Evelyn climbed the entrance steps with trembling legs. Her only suit, bought from a second-hand store, itched at her neck. Dr. Mendez was waiting for her in the hallway. "Ready?" "No." "Great. Let's go in." The hearing room was smaller than she had imagined. Jason was already there, talking with his lawyer. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car. "Don't look at him," Dr. Mendez whispered. "Focus on me." They sat down. The judge entered, a bald man with a severe expression. "Case 2847, he announced. "Custody of minor David Santos." Evelyn felt her breakfast churning in her stomach. The back door opened silently. William entered, sitting in the last row. "Mr. Jason Santos," the judge continued, "you allege financial incapacity of the mother?" "Yes, Your Honor." Jason stood up. "I have her bank statements here." Dr. Mendez raised his hand. "Your Honor, we also have documents to present." He took a folder from his briefcase. Evelyn recognized the contract William had left at her house last night. "Mrs. Santos is now a partner in a business venture," Dr. Mendez explained. "A bakery at Hope Farm." Jason turned abruptly. His face turned red when he saw William. "This is fraudulent," Jason's lawyer protested. "She can barely pay rent." "All documents are in order," Dr. Mendez responded calmly. "Registered just yesterday." The judge examined the papers. "Seems legitimate. Proceed." "Dr. Mendez, we also have evidence of harassment." He pulled more papers from the folder. "Threatening messages, stalking." "Objection," Jason's lawyer shouted. "Overruled." The judge cut in. "I want to see this evidence." Evelyn kept her eyes fixed on the table while the judge read. Her hands trembled under the polished wood. "Mr. Santos," the judge spoke after a while, "is this true?" "The messages are taken out of context," Jason responded, his voice tense. "And the police reports?" Silence. Evelyn felt tears in her eyes. "Your Honor, Doctor." Mendez stood. "We request temporary joint custody until the final hearing." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Based on the evidence presented, I grant temporary joint custody." "But," Jason began. "David will stay alternately with each parent," the judge continued. "1 week with each until the final hearing." Evelyn covered her mouth with her hands. Tears streamed down her face. "You may pick up your son today," the judge concluded. Hearing adjourned. Jason stormed out, his lawyer running after him. "Doctor," Mendez smiled at Evelyn. "First victory," he said, "but we still have work ahead." William approached when they left the room. "Congratulations. You registered the contract yesterday?" Evelyn asked. "Thought it might help," he smiled. "And it did." "I'm going to get David now," she said. "Want to come with me?" "Of course." In William's car, Evelyn finally took a deep breath. "I can't believe I did it." "We did it," he corrected. "And this is just the beginning." They stopped in front of the school. David was playing in the yard with other children. "Mommy!" he shouted when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn knelt down, hugging her son. "I came to get you. You're sleeping at my house tonight." "Really?" His eyes sparkled. "Really?" She wiped away a tear. "And you know what else? I'm going to show you a special place." David looked at William, curious. "Who is he?" "A friend." Evelyn held her son's hand. "A good friend." William's pickup truck stopped in front of the barn at Hope Farm. David jumped from the back seat, his eyes wide at the sight of the place. "Is it a real farm?" he asked, pointing to the horses. "Real," William replied. "Want to meet the animals later?" David looked at Evelyn, asking for permission. "First, I want to show you something," she said, taking her son's hand. They entered the empty barn. Sunlight came through the large windows, making patterns on the concrete floor. "What's going to be here, Mom?" "A pie shop." Evelyn knelt beside him. "Like the ones Grandma used to make. Remember the apple ones?" His eyes sparkled. "Those?" "Exactly." Thunder rumbled in the distance. William looked through the window. "More rain coming?" he said. David squeezed his mother's hand. "I don't like thunder." "Me neither," Evelyn smiled. "But we're safe here." The rain started falling, first slowly, then hard. The sound on the zinc roof was comforting. "Come," William called. "I'll show you the main house before the rain gets worse." They ran through the wet grass. David laughed, jumping in the puddles that were starting to form. The front door opened. A police car stopped on the dirt road. "Evelyn Santos?" The officer got out, shielding himself from the rain. "Yes? Mr. Jason Santos is filing a complaint against you." He handed her a wet paper. "For trespassing." "What?" Evelyn took the document with trembling hands. "He claims you don't have authorization to be here." "Yes, she does." William stepped forward. "She's my partner." The officer looked from one to the other. "Even so, I need to ask you to leave." "No!" David shouted, hugging his mother's waist. "She didn't do anything wrong." "Son," Evelyn began. "The property is mine," William interrupted. "I have all the necessary documents." "I'm sorry, sir." The officer shook his head. "Court orders." David started crying. The rain was falling harder now. "It's okay," Evelyn said, swallowing her tears. "Come on, David." "You can't go in this rain," William protested. "The patrol car can give you a ride," the officer offered. "No." William took the truck keys. "I'll drive them." On the way to Evelyn's apartment, David fell asleep in the back seat. Silent tears ran down her face. "He won't win," William said softly. "He already has." She looked out the window. "How am I going to open the shop now?" "We'll sort this out." William stopped the car. "Trust me." Evelyn carried sleeping David inside. When she returned, William was still there in the rain. "I'm sorry," she said, "for involving you in all this." "Don't apologize." He came closer. "You're stronger than you think, Evelyn." The rain was soaking them both, but neither moved. "Why do you keep helping me?" William touched her face gently. "Because you deserve to be happy." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling his hand on her face. "Mommy?" David's voice came from the door. "Is everything okay?" She stepped back quickly. "Everything's fine, son. I'll be right up." William went back to the truck. "See you tomorrow." Evelyn nodded. Picking up David, from the apartment window they watched the truck leave in the rain. David yawned in her arms. "I liked him, Mom." "Me too, son." She kissed his forehead. "Me too." The phone rang at 6 in the morning. Evelyn fumbled in the darkness, trying not to wake David, who was sleeping beside her. "Hello? Mrs. Santos?" It was Dr. Mendez. "We have an emergency." She sat up in bed. David stirred, but didn't wake. "What happened?" "Jason filed for an injunction. He's alleging parental alienation." "What?" Her voice came out louder than intended. "He has photos of you with William. He's saying you're trying to replace him as a father." Evelyn looked at David sleeping. Her heart was pounding in her chest. "When?" "Hearing this afternoon?" The lawyer sighed. 3 mug. "But it's my week with David." "I know. That's why we need to act quickly." She got up slowly from the bed. "What do we do?" "Come to the office now and bring William." David opened his eyes as she hung up. "Why is it early, Mom?" "I know, love." She kissed his forehead. "I need to take care of some things. I'll leave you with Roberto, okay?" "At the restaurant?" He perked up. "Can I have a milkshake?" "You can." Roberto was already opening Parata 301 when they arrived. He looked at Evelyn's tense face and understood immediately. "Go to the kitchen, champ," he said to David. "I'll teach you how to make hamburgers." Evelyn grabbed her phone as soon as David disappeared through the kitchen door. Her hands were shaking when she dialed William's number. "I need you," she said when he answered. "I'm coming." "Doctor." Mendez's office was cold. William arrived 5 minutes after her, still wearing his work clothes from the farm. "Show me the photos," he asked. The lawyer spread several images on the table. Evelyn and William at the farm, the two in the rain, him touching her face. "Son of a..." William muttered. "He had someone following me," Evelyn said. "That's illegal," Dr. Mendez said. "But it will work in our favor." "How?" "Shows he's obsessive, controlling." The lawyer grabbed more papers. "And there's more." He showed financial documents, suspicious transactions, large deposits with unclear origins. "Where did you get this?" Evelyn asked. "I have my contacts. Doctor..." Mendez smiled. Jason isn't as clean as he appears. William studied the photos in silence. I'm sorry, Evelyn said to him. I put you in a situation. Stop. He took her hand. It's not your fault. Dr. Mendez cleared his throat. I need both of you at the hearing, but you have to be careful. Why? Because this is exactly what Jason wants. The lawyer pointed to their joined hands. He wants to prove there's something more. Evelyn let go of William's hand as if it burned. And is there? Dr. Mendez asked. She looked at William. He kept his eyes on the photos. No, she answered. There's nothing. Silence weighed in the room. Dr. Mendez organized the papers. Great. See you at 3. Outside, William stopped Evelyn before she could get in the car. Is it true? What? That there's nothing? She looked at her own feet. I need to get David. Evelyn, I can't. She swallowed her tears. Not now, William nodded slowly. See you at the hearing. She drove back to the restaurant with blurred vision. David was in the kitchen covered in flour, smiling. Look, Mom. He showed her a crooked hamburger. I made it. Evelyn hugged him tight, no longer able to hold back her tears. Why are you crying? He asked. Because I love you so much. She kissed his flour-covered face. So very much. The clock showed 11. 4 hours until the hearing that could change everything. The courthouse hallway was packed. Evelyn sat on a hard bench, adjusting her suit skirt for the 10th time. Roberto had stayed with David at the restaurant. Dr. Mendez arrived at 2:45, carrying his leather briefcase. Jason is already in the room, he informed, with 3 lawyers. Evelyn felt her stomach turn. 3? It doesn't matter how many there are, the lawyer smiled. What matters is who's right. William arrived 2 minutes later. He had changed from his farm clothes into a dark blue suit. His eyes met Evelyn's for a second before looking away. Ready? Dr. Mendez asked. The hearing room seemed smaller than last time. Jason and his lawyers occupied the entire prosecution table. He smiled when he saw Evelyn enter. All rise, the officer announced. The judge was different from the previous one, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a stern look. Case 2847B, she began. Injunction for parental alienation. Jason's first lawyer stood up. Your Honor, we have evidence that the defendant is trying to replace the father figure. He projected the photos on the wall, Evelyn at the farm with William, the two in the rain. The defendant began a romantic relationship without considering the psychological impact on the child. Objection, Dr. Orr. Mendez stood. Speculation. Sustained, the judge said. Counselor, stick to the facts. The facts are clear, the lawyer pointed to William. This man is trying to take the father's place. Your Honor, Dr. Mendez interrupted, I'd like to present other evidence. He projected his own photos, Jason following Evelyn, men taking hidden pictures. The plaintiff hired private investigators without judicial authorization, Dr. Mendez explained. He's stalking my client. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We also have, Dr. Mendez continued, evidence of suspicious transactions by the plaintiff. The financial documents appeared on the screen. Jason stood up abruptly. This is irrelevant. Sit down, Mr. Santos, the judge ordered. Dr. Mendez, what's the relevance? The plaintiff is using money of dubious origin to finance this persecution. The room fell silent. Jason whispered nervously with his lawyers. Your Honor, Dr. Mendez said, I call William Martinez to testify. William rose slowly. Evelyn held her breath. Mr. Martinez, Dr. Mendez began, what is your relationship with Mrs. Santos? I'm her business partner, William replied. Nothing more. The photos show something different, Jason's lawyer interrupted. They show one friend helping another, William said firmly. Mrs. Santos is a dedicated mother. She works hard. She deserves a chance. And the touches? The looks? Objection, Doctor. Mendez shouted. Badgering! Sustained. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Martinez, continue. William looked directly at Jason. I know men like you. Men who use money and power to control others. Why? Jason started to rise. Silence! The judge banged her gavel. Mr. Santos, one more time, and you'll be removed from the room. William continued. David needs his mother, and she needs him. It's that simple. The judge took notes for several minutes. Silence weighed in the room. Based on the evidence, she finally spoke, I deny the injunction. Evelyn released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering an investigation into Mr. Santos's activities. Jason rose furiously. This is absurd. Remove yourself, the judge ordered. Now. He stormed out, followed by his lawyers. Dr. Mendez smiled at Evelyn. We won this battle. She nodded, tears in her eyes. William had already left the room. Evelyn found William in the courthouse parking lot. He was leaning against his truck, looking at the clear sky. Why did you leave like that? She asked. Needed air, he kept looking up. And you needed your moment. William, you don't need to say anything. He finally looked at her. I did what needed to be done. Her phone rang. It was Roberto. David is asking for you, he said. And there's something else. Jason just came by. Evelyn froze. What did he want? Took the boy, said he was going to the police station to file a report. No, she gripped the phone. He can't. William was already opening the truck door. Get in. They reached the police station in 10 minutes. David was sitting in a chair, crying. Jason was yelling at a police officer. My son! Evelyn ran to David. Don't touch him, Jason shouted. Mr. Santos, the officer intervened. Calm down. She's destroying my family, Jason pointed at William. With his help, Dad, David spoke for the first time. Stop yelling. Jason froze. The officer took the opportunity to position himself between them. Sir, we have no basis for a report, he said. The joint custody is valid. She's dating, Jason tried again. Putting a stranger in my son's life. You barely know me, David cried. You just yell. The room fell silent. Jason looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time. David, he began. I want to go with Mommy. The boy hugged Evelyn. Please. The court order is clear, the officer said. It's the Mother's Week. Jason ran his hand over his face. For the first time, he looked defeated. Fine. He grabbed his car keys. Fine. William, who had been quiet until then, stepped forward. Your son deserves better than this, he said quietly. Be better. Jason looked at him for a long moment, then left without saying anything. On the way home, David fell asleep in the truck's back seat. Evelyn looked out the window, exhausted. I'm sorry, William broke the silence. For what? I said in court about there being nothing between us, about knowing men like Jason. He sighed. I shouldn't have made it personal. But is there, she asked softly, something between us? William stopped at a red light. You know there is. David stirred in the back seat. Evelyn looked at her son in the rearview mirror. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. William started driving again. That's why I ran from the room. I thought it was because of me. It was. He smiled sadly. Because every time I look at you, it gets harder to pretend it's just friendship. The rest of the drive was silent. When they reached the apartment, David woke up. William, he called sleepily. Will you make hamburgers for us? Evelyn and William looked at each other. Another day, champ. William ruffled his hair. Promise. David went up the stairs first. Evelyn stopped at the door. Thank you, she said. For everything today. Always. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned in and kissed his cheek. Good night, William. A week later, Evelyn parked in front of Hope Farm. David jumped from the back seat before she could even turn off the car. Careful, she shouted, but he was already running toward the barn. William was waiting at the entrance, holding a clipboard. He smiled when he saw David. Hey, champ, ready to work? Yes. David skidded to a stop. Where are the horses? After work, William winked. First, we have a shop to build. Evelyn approached slowly. It was her first time back since the hearing. "The builders arrive in an hour," William informed. "I thought we could review the plans before." Inside the barn, plans and drawings covered a makeshift table. "Look, Mom." David pointed to a drawing. "Like your pie." It was a simple logo, Evelyn's Pies, in cursive letters with an apple pie drawing beside it. "You did this?" she asked William. David helped. He smiled. "The apple was his idea. It's the best pie in the world," David declared. A truck stopped outside. The builders began unloading materials. "Will it take long?" David asked. 2 weeks, William answered. "If we work hard." "Can I help?" "Of course." William handed him a small hard hat. "You're our junior supervisor." David put on the hat, proud. He ran outside to watch the builders working. "He seems happy," William observed. "He is." Evelyn touched the logo drawing. "Happier than I've seen him in a long time." "And you?" She looked at him. William was still holding the clipboard, but his eyes were fixed on her. "I am too." "Mom!" David shouted from outside. "Come see, the builders had already started tearing down a wall. Dust rose in the morning air. Watch your eyes," she said to David. "I know." He pointed to the safety goggles one of the workers had given him. William came up behind her. "Worried?" "Always," she sighed, "but less than before." "Has Jason shown up again?" "No." She watched David helping carry small bricks. "I think he finally understood." A breeze blew, carrying the smell of coffee from the main house. The workers had turned on a radio, soft country music playing. "About that night," William began. "William, I need to say it." He put down the clipboard. "I don't want to pretend anymore." Evelyn looked at David, now sitting on a pile of sand, drawing with a stick. "I don't either," she admitted. William took her hand. This time she didn't let go. "Mom!" David shouted again. "Can I ride the horse now?" She laughed. "After lunch, promise." "Promise?" William squeezed her hand gently. "How about we have a picnic? There's good shade near the stable." David jumped excitedly. "Can it be hamburgers?" "Not today." Evelyn smiled. "I brought apple pie." Her son's eyes lit up. "Grandma's?" "The same one." William released her hand slowly. The touch left a tingling on her skin. "I'll get a blanket," he said. Evelyn watched him walk away. David was still playing in the sand. The builders worked to the sound of country music. For the first time in a long time, she felt at home. 2 months later, Evelyn woke up before sunrise. The smell of dough already came from the apartment kitchen. "David?" she called, putting on her apron. "I'm here." His voice came from the small counter. "I've already sorted the apples." He was sitting on a tall stool, focused on peeling the fruit with a plastic knife. "Watch your fingers," she warned. "I know, Mom." He showed the perfectly peeled apples, just like Grandma taught. It was the big day, the shop's opening. Evelyn started preparing the dough, her fingers working from memory. "What time is William coming?" David asked. "At 7 so." She checked the clock, 5:30. "We need to have 10 pies ready by then." "Can I add the cinnamon?" "You can." They worked in comfortable silence. The sun began to rise, painting the kitchen gold. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. David ran to open it. "Brought reinforcements," William said from the door, carrying boxes. Roberto was behind him with more boxes. "The pies?" Evelyn asked. "All here," Roberto smiled. "Spent the night making them." "You didn't have to." "Of course I did." He ruffled David's hair. "It's a special day." William left the boxes in the kitchen and stopped beside Evelyn. "Nervous?" "Very." He kissed her forehead lightly. David pretended to make a disgusted face but was smiling. They arrived at the farm at 8. The barn was unrecognizable. Light wood counters, rustic tables, the logo on the main wall. "Wow," David whispered. "All ready," William said. "Just need the pies." They arranged everything in silence. Roberto organized the new kitchen. David put flowers on the tables. At 9 Ma, the first car stopped at the entrance. Already? Evelyn felt her heart speed up. Roberto's marketing, William smiled. He spread the word through the entire restaurant. More cars arrived soon. A small line formed at the door. Breathe, William whispered, holding her hand. You can do this. David opened the main door. Welcome to my mom's shop. People entered smiling. The smell of freshly baked pie filled the air. This recipe, an elderly lady commented after the first bite, reminds me of my childhood. It was my grandmother's, Evelyn explained, serving coffee. She would be proud, the lady smiled. By noon, half the pies were gone. David ran between tables, filling coffee cups. Going well? William asked, hugging Evelyn from behind. Couldn't be better. A familiar car stopped outside. Jason got out, adjusting his tie. Evelyn froze. William squeezed her shoulders gently. Want me to ask him to leave? No, she took a deep breath. Let him in. Jason stopped at the door, looking around. David saw his father and ran to him. Dad, come see the kitchen. Jason followed his son, looking uncomfortable. He stopped at the counter where Evelyn was. "One slice of apple?" he asked. "Please." She served in silence. Jason tried a piece. "Just like she used to make," he said quietly. "Grandma taught me," David said proudly. "You—" Jason hesitated. "But you did a good job here, Evelyn." "Thank you." He paid, left a generous tip, and left after hugging David. "Are you okay?" William asked when he left. "I am," she smiled. "Really am." The afternoon flew by. When the sun began to set, Roberto turned on the outside lights. "Last batch coming out," he announced from the kitchen. David had fallen asleep at one of the tables, surrounded by drawings of future pies. "I think we tired out our supervisor," William joked, picking up the boy. It was quite a day. Evelyn started cleaning the counter. The first of many. She stopped, looking around. The empty tables, the smell of pie in the air, the soft lights. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For believing in me, for not giving up." William gently placed David on a couch in the corner, came back and took her hands. "I'll never give up." Outside, the last customers were leaving. The sky was painted orange and pink. "You know what Grandma always said?" Evelyn rested her head on his chest. "What?" "That sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters." William kissed the top of her head. David slept peacefully on the couch. The smell of apple and cinnamon still lingered in the air. "She was right," he said. Evelyn closed her eyes, smiling. Finally, after so long, she was at peace. She was home,